162. That was the number I woke up to for months. Not after a bad dinner, not after cheating on anything. After a careful evening, sensible plate, medication taken on time. 162, waiting for me every morning before I had touched a single bite of food. I knew what it meant. I had been living with type 2 diabetes long enough to know exactly what that number was telling me. And I knew what the doctor was going to say at the next visit, that the medication might need adjusting, that I needed to be more careful, that these things happen. But nobody said, what nobody had ever said in 20-plus years of appointments, was why. Why the number was high before breakfast, why it refused to move no matter what I did during the day, why my body was doing something in the dark that my daytime discipline could not reach. I'm 83 years old. I walk every day. My mind is sharp. I manage my own life, my meals, my appointments, my mornings. And I want to tell you that the number I wake up to now is not the number that used to greet me. That change did not come from a new prescription. It came from 10 minutes I had been throwing away every evening without knowing what they were worth. If you have been waking up to a high fasting reading for months or years, if you have done everything your doctor asked and the morning number still will not cooperate, then what I'm about to explain is the part of the picture that was missing. Not because anyone was hiding it, because it happens while you sleep, and nobody has time in a clinic visit to walk you through what your body does between midnight and sunrise. Stay with me, because once you understand the mechanism, the 10 minutes I'm going to describe will never feel optional again. Here's what your body is doing while you sleep. Your liver does not stop working when you do. In the early hours of the morning, roughly 2 to 4, your brain begins preparing for the day. Cortisol starts to rise, growth hormone pulses, and your liver, receiving those hormonal signals, releases stored glucose into your bloodstream. Researchers have studied this process for decades and given it a name, the dawn phenomenon. It is not a disease, it is a normal part of human biology, designed to give you fuel before you wake. The problem begins after 60, after years of insulin resistance have changed the equation. In a body where insulin sensitivity is intact, that early morning glucose release is modest and the insulin response clears it efficiently. The morning number is unremarkable. But when your cells have spent years becoming less responsive to insulin, when the lock and key mechanism has stiffened, the liver releases glucose and the insulin that should clear it cannot do its job at full efficiency. So that glucose accumulates. By the time your alarm goes off, it has been sitting in your bloodstream, largely unchallenged, for hours. Now here's the part that took me the longest to understand, and the part that changes everything. The size of that overnight glucose release, how much substrate your liver has to work with in the early hours, is directly connected to how much glucose is still circulating in your blood when you fall asleep. If your blood sugar at 10 o'clock at night is elevated, even mildly, even from a dinner that seemed reasonable, your liver enters that 2 to 4 window with more material than it needs. It is not creating glucose from nothing. It is working with what is already there. The morning number is not just a product of what your liver does at 3 in the morning. It is a product of what you went to sleep carrying, which means there is a window in the hour after dinner before you sit down for the evening where you can change what your liver finds when it starts working in the dark. And the reason most people never use that window is that nobody explains it in an appointment. A physician I knew for years, someone who had spent decades in metabolic medicine, told me once that the post-dinner hour was the most underestimated window in blood sugar management, not because it was complicated, because it was never the focus of the visit. The focus was always the medication, the morning reading, the A1C. The 10 minutes after dinner were invisible. They do not have to be. Subscribe, there is more of this coming, and drop your fasting number in the comments, just the number. You do everything right. You eat clean, you take your pills, and the next morning that number is still too high. I know that frustration. I lived it for years. They never tell you about the morning rise, your sugar climbing while you sleep, no matter what you did the day before. You wake up, you test, and it feels like the work didn't count, like you're stuck depending on more and getting nowhere. I was done feeling powerless. I didn't want to throw out my doctor's plan. I wanted something natural and simple I could add to it, something that finally moved that morning number. I'll walk you through what changed it for me, and the natural support I add every day is in the free presentation linked below. What I do before sleep is walk. 10 minutes. After dinner, before I sit down for the evening. Not a power walk, not exercise in any traditional sense. A slow, steady 10 minutes. Around the block if the weather allows, around the living room if it does not. The pace does not matter much. The timing does. Here's the mechanism, and it is one of the most important things I've learned about my own body in 20 years of managing this condition. When your muscles contract, even slowly, even gently, they activate a transporter inside the muscle cell wall. This transporter pulls glucose out of your bloodstream and into the muscle tissue directly, without waiting for insulin to authorize the transfer. The pathway is completely separate from the insulin system. It does not care whether your insulin receptors are stiff or sensitive. It does not care whether your pancreas is struggling. It activates purely from movement, and it works immediately. Research specifically studying post-meal walking in older adults with impaired glucose found something that surprised even the researchers who conducted the study. 3 short walks taken after meals were significantly more effective at reducing the 24-hour blood sugar curve than a single longer walk taken in the morning. The timing was the variable, not the duration, not the intensity. When the walk happened, right after glucose from a meal was entering the bloodstream, determined most of the effect. Think about what that means in practical terms. The glucose your dinner produced is peaking in your blood roughly 45 to 90 minutes after you finish eating. Your liver is not yet involved. Your muscles are at rest, using almost no glucose on their own. And that glucose is simply circulating, waiting to be cleared. The moment you start moving, even slowly, those muscle transporters activate. The glucose has somewhere to go. It gets pulled out of the bloodstream before your body settles into sleep. And when your liver begins its overnight work a few hours later, it finds a lower baseline than it would have found if you had sat down immediately after eating. Lower baseline going in, smaller release coming out, lower number in the morning. That is the chain, and it costs nothing. It requires no equipment. It does not demand anything of your joints beyond what a slow stroll requires. 10 minutes after dinner every evening. I've been doing this for years now. I do not skip it. Not when I am tired, not when the weather is difficult, not when the evening feels long. Because I know what the number looks like when I do skip it, and I know what it looks like when I do not. The difference is consistent enough that skipping no longer feels like rest. It feels like leaving something on the table. But the walk is one part of a system, and the system matters more than any single piece, because the dawn phenomenon responds to 3 things you control. The first is the baseline glucose you carry into sleep, which the walk addresses directly. The second is the depth and quality of your sleep itself, which controls the cortisol curve that triggers your liver in the early hours. And the third is what you eat, or do not eat, in the hour before bed, which can either stabilize that baseline or undo the work the walk just did. On sleep, research has shown that a single night of fragmented sleep, 4 or 5 hours instead of 7 or 8, is associated with a measurable rise in insulin resistance the following day. Not weeks of poor sleep, one night. Because when sleep is broken, cortisol rises earlier and more steeply, which amplifies the liver's early morning glucose release. A bedroom kept between 65 and 68 degrees supports the drop in core temperature your brain needs to reach deep, restorative sleep. That is one adjustment, a thermostat, a fan, a lighter blanket, and it changes the hormonal landscape of the entire night. On what comes before bed. If you need something after dinner, make it something that does not spike your blood sugar. A small amount of slow-digesting protein, cottage cheese, plain Greek yogurt, releases amino acids gradually through the night without producing a glucose surge. It keeps your body in a mild fed state, which quiets the signals that push the liver to overcompensate. What you want to avoid is fast-digesting sugar eaten alone in the hour before sleep. Fruit juice, ripe fruit by itself, anything that delivers glucose quickly to a digestive system that is slowing toward rest. The walk clears the dinner glucose. The cool room deepens the sleep. The protein before bed steadies the overnight baseline. 3 inputs, 1 overnight system. The morning number reflects all three. At 83, I get up from my chair without thinking about it. I carry my own groceries. I visit the people I love without needing to arrange everything around my condition. That kind of freedom, moving through a day without the diagnosis running the schedule, did not come from any single change. It came from understanding what the overnight hours were doing to me and deciding to do something about it. I want to tell you about a man named Raymond. 74 years old, retired from the post office in Alabama, 31 years on his feet carrying mail. A man who had walked for a living and then, in retirement, had mostly stopped. His fasting numbers had been climbing for 3 years, between 155 and 175 most mornings. His doctor had recently used the word insulin in a way that felt like a door closing. Raymond started walking after dinner. Just 10 minutes every evening, the same loop around his neighborhood. Nothing else changed in the first 2 weeks. His medications stayed the same, his diet stayed roughly the same. By the end of the 3rd week, his morning readings had begun shifting, not dramatically, but the 170s became 150s, and then 140s, and then readings he had not seen in years. He told me what surprised him most was that he had been walking his whole life and had never thought about when to walk. Raymond is not a clinical case study. His story is a pattern I have watched repeat itself enough times that I no longer think of the post-dinner window as optional information. It is the piece that most people managing this condition have never been given, not because it is complicated, because it fits into a 10-minute slot that nobody in a clinic has time to discuss. I want to say something clearly before we go further. Everything in this video is designed to work alongside your doctor's care, not instead of it. If you are on medication, metformin, insulin, anything, do not change your protocol without speaking to your physician. Bring your numbers to them, show them the trend. The habits I am describing are support, not replacement. The decisions about your treatment belong with the person who knows your full history. Now I want you to sit with something for a moment. Think about the mornings, the ones where you did everything right and the numbers still did not move. The quiet frustration of following every instruction and watching the reading sit there, unchanged, like it did not care how hard you were trying. The appointments where the answer was always adjust the medication, watch the diet, never here is what is happening in your body while you sleep, and here is what you can do about it before you close your eyes tonight. You were not failing. You were working without information that should have been given to you. The overnight window exists, the mechanism is real, and the 10 minutes after dinner, the ones you have been sitting through every evening without knowing what they were worth, are still available to you. The number that has been refusing to move is not permanent. It responds to the right inputs at the right time, and you have not run out of time to give it those inputs. The people you want to see, the visits you want to make, the evenings you want to spend without the weight of that morning reading hanging over everything, those are still possible. The window is still open. If you watched this whole thing, you're not the type who gives up. You're the type who keeps looking for a real answer. So let me be straight with you. The morning number isn't your fault, and it isn't just diabetes. It's the dawn rise, and it responds to the right daily habits. The goal was never to quit your treatment. It was to support it naturally so you finally see that number move and feel in control again. Alongside the steps I showed you, I take a simple, natural support every day to help keep my blood sugar in a healthy range. Affordable, easy, and it works with my doctor's plan, not against it. The free presentation is in the description below. Go see it for yourself. And keep your doctor in the loop. This is support, not a replacement. Everything I have shared today is based on physiological and nutritional research I have followed carefully for many years. It is not personal medical advice. Your body is different from mine. If you have any condition that affects how you move or how you metabolize food, speak with your doctor before making changes. And bring these ideas to that conversation. The best results I have ever seen come when information and good medical care work together. 10 minutes after dinner, tonight. That is where it starts.